He threw a $1 bill at her face. One single dollar. That was the price Marcus Vance put on 3 years of marriage, on every dream she had sacrificed, on every tear she had cried, alone in the bathroom. He stood there, in his $10,000 suit, his pregnant mistress clinging to his arm, laughing at the woman he had just destroyed. But here's what Marcus did not know. The quiet librarian he had just kicked onto the streets of Seattle in the pouring rain was not who she claimed to be. The woman shivering on that sidewalk, clutching an old suitcase with only $63 to her name, was hiding a secret worth $450 million. And the phone call she was about to make would set into motion a revenge so devastating, so perfectly calculated, that within 72 hours, Marcus Vance would be signing over his entire company for the exact same amount he had thrown at her face, $1. This is the story of how a man who believed he had married a nobody discovered, in the most humiliating way possible, that he had actually declared war on the most powerful family on the East Coast. And by the time he realized his mistake, it was already too late. This story will show you why true power never needs to announce itself, and why the people who underestimate you will always become the architects of their own destruction. It is merely the quiet that comes before a hurricane. The Seattle rain always felt like it was giving a warning. But on that particular Tuesday evening, it felt more like a final judgment. Aaron stood near the enormous window of the penthouse on the 42nd floor, observing the city lights becoming a blur in the heavy rain. From behind her, the sound of a zipper being pulled shut was the only disturbance in the vast, cold living room. "Are you paying any attention to me at all?" The sharpness in Marcus's voice was like a jagged blade that had been chipping away at her confidence for 3 years. Aaron pivoted around slowly. Her husband, Marcus Vance, was standing near the doorway with a leather suitcase by his feet. It was not his suitcase. It was hers. It was the same old, worn-out luggage she had carried when she came to live with him 3 years earlier. "I did hear you, Marcus," she replied quietly. Her voice was firm, but her hands were shaking inside the pockets of her sweater. "You want me to leave? I do not just want you to leave, Aaron. I am making you leave tonight." Marcus glanced at his Rolex, a platinum watch she knew was worth more than her father's entire retirement fund. "Lydia will be moving in tomorrow morning. I do not want her to have to look at your things. It is not good for the baby's atmosphere." Hearing the name Lydia felt like a shard of ice piercing Aaron's chest. Lydia was not just some other woman. She was the personal assistant to Marcus. She was a woman for whom Aaron had prepared meals, a woman Aaron had expressed gratitude to for arranging Marcus's calendar so he could come home for their anniversary, an anniversary he had spent sending text messages to Lydia from under the dinner table. "She is pregnant," Aaron said, making a statement, not a question. The gossip had gotten to her weeks before, whispered by the building staff who all looked at her with sympathy. 4 months along, Marcus smirked while he straightened his silk tie. "It is a boy, an heir to the family. That is something you were obviously unable to give me." This was his most vicious attack. Marcus was aware of the medical issues, the quiet appointments with Dr. Henderson, and the tears she had cried alone in the guest bathroom. He understood that she desired a family above all else. "We have a rental agreement, Marcus. My name is on the access list for this building." Aaron attempted to use logic, even though she knew it was pointless. Marcus let out a dry, humorless laugh. He strode to the coffee table and grabbed a thick envelope. He threw it directly at her. It struck her in the chest before dropping onto the carpet. "That is the paperwork for the divorce, and a copy of the prenuptial agreement you signed. Article 4, Section 2. It states that in a case of infidelity or a separation started by the spouse with the higher income because of fundamental differences, the financially dependent spouse gives up all claims to financial support, shared property, and other assets. Aaron glanced down at the documents. I was never unfaithful to you. That does not make a difference. Marcus sneered and moved closer until he was towering over her. I have very aggressive attorneys, Aaron. My representative is Silas Thorne. Do you have any idea what he charges per hour? It is more than your entire annual salary as a librarian. If you decide to oppose me, I will overwhelm you with legal costs until you are on your knees begging for a cardboard box to live in. Just sign the uncontested forms, gather your junk, and get out. He forcefully kicked the suitcase in her direction. She looked at the man she had chosen to marry. She recalled the charm he had radiated 3 years before, the down-to-earth architect who claimed to love her quiet mind. Every part of it had been an act. He had chosen her for a wife because she was harmless, a nobody from a place with no influence who would not get in his way while he constructed his empire. At least, that is what he believed. You are making a terrible mistake, Marcus, Aaron said, her voice sinking to a near whisper. The only mistake I ever made was believing you could belong in my world, he shot back. You are boring, Aaron. You lack connections, you have no drive, and you have zero taste. Lydia, on the other hand, she elevates the brand. You were only ever a temporary solution. The elevator chimed, its private doors opened, and 2 security guards, men whose names Aaron used to greet them with each morning, entered the room. Their eyes were fixed on the floor, as they could not bring themselves to look at her. Please escort Mrs. Vance from the premises, Marcus ordered, turning his back on her to pour a glass of scotch. And be sure to confiscate her key card. Mir Vance, it is raining very heavily outside. One of the guards, a decent man named Jerry, mumbled under his breath. That is not my concern, Jerry. Either you do your job, or I will hire someone else who will. Aaron lifted a hand, signaling for Jerry not to touch her arm. It is all right, Jerry. I am able to walk on my own. She bent over to pick up both the envelope and her suitcase. She left her clothes behind. She left the jewelry he had given her to wear for public appearances. She left the tablet computer and the credit cards. She departed with only the suitcase she had arrived with. When she got to the elevator, she stopped for a moment and glanced back at Marcus. He was taking a sip of his drink, looking at his own reflection in the dark window. Marcus, she called out. He did not turn to face her. Goodbye, Aaron. I truly hope you never forget this moment, she said, her voice strangely composed. I hope you always remember what it felt like to have this much power. The elevator doors closed, shutting her away from the life she had worked so hard to create. The trip down took 40 seconds. As Aaron exited the lobby of the Obsidian Tower, the cold wind hit her face immediately. The rain was coming down in sheets. She did not have an umbrella. She pulled her suitcase across the wet sidewalk of 4th Avenue. She had only $63 in her purse. Her personal bank account was empty. Marcus had access to their joint accounts and had most likely put a hold on her funds during the legal process, a cruel move to make sure she could not afford an attorney. She walked for 2 blocks, the water soaking completely through her shoes until she took shelter under the awning of a coffee shop that had closed for the night. She trembled and pulled her coat around herself more tightly. People walking by paid her no attention. In their eyes, she was just another sad sight in the city at night. But Aaron was not shedding any tears. She reached inside her suitcase, into the lining, and tore open a small seam she had stitched shut years before. Her fingers found a cold, solid piece of plastic. It was a disposable phone and a small notepad with one phone number written on its first page. She had made a promise to herself that she would never dial this number. She had abandoned that world a decade ago to pursue a normal, simple life, far from the public eye, far from all the expectations, and far from him. She had wanted to be loved for who she was, not because of the famous name she had been born with. Marcus had fallen for Aaron the librarian, but he had also destroyed her. Now he was about to be introduced to Aaron Vanderquilt. She turned on the old phone. It had almost no battery charge left. Her fingers, which were numb from the cold, carefully dialed the number. The phone rang one time, then a second. "This is a restricted line," a deep, business-like voice said. "State your name." Aaron drew a deep breath, taking in the scent of rain and car fumes. "It is me, Julian," she said in a whisper. A profound silence followed on the other end, so complete that it seemed the call had been disconnected. Then she heard the sound of a chair being pushed back, of sudden movement, of urgency. "Elle?" The voice was strained, losing its corporate world toughness. "Aaron, is that really you? My goodness, we have been searching. Where have you been?" "I am in Seattle," she answered, her voice finally cracking as the rush of adrenaline faded. "I made a terrible error, Julian." "You were correct. You were correct about all of it. Are you in a safe place?" His voice was now commanding. It was the tone of a person accustomed to leading armies, or in his situation, a massive international company. "No," she confessed, glancing at a homeless man who was staring at her suitcase from a short distance away. "I am on the street. He threw me out of my home. He took everything from me." "Who?" The word came out like a growl. "My husband, Marcus Vance." "Vance?" Julian said the name again, as if he were tasting poison. "The architect, the one who builds those cheap, high-rise buildings downtown." "Yes." "Do not move from your current location. Send me your position. Do not go anywhere." "Julian, I do not want to return to the family. I only need a lawyer, a very good one." "You do not need a lawyer, Elle," Julian responded, and she could hear a car door slam on his end of the line. She could also hear the whine of a private jet engine starting up nearby. "You need a team for a war, and you are about to get one. He claims I signed a prenuptial agreement. He claims I will receive nothing." Julian laughed. It was a dark and frightening sound that made Marcus's earlier chuckle seem like something from a small child. "He believes he is playing a game of checkers, Elle. He is completely unaware that he just challenged a grandmaster to a match. I am on my way to get you, and may God show mercy to Mr. Vance, because I absolutely will not." Aaron ended the call. She slid down the brick wall of the coffee shop until she was sitting on her suitcase. She watched the rain fall, as if it were cleansing her of the past 3 years of her life. Marcus Vance had desired a wife who was nothing more than a status symbol. He had cast aside a librarian, but what he had actually done was declare war on the only heir to the Vanderquilt technology fortune, and her brother, the most unforgiving chief executive officer on the East Coast, was already on his way. By the time headlights sliced through the gloom, the rain had become a solid gray curtain. It was not a single car. It was a convoy of 3 polished black Cadillac Escalades with dark windows, moving in a tight, aggressive line that made the few other cars on the street swerve to get out of their path. They came to a sudden stop right in front of the coffee shop. The door of the front vehicle swung open before it had even finished braking. A man emerged. He did not bother to run, despite the heavy rain. He moved with a frightening sense of purpose. He was a tall man, dressed in a custom-made charcoal suit that probably cost more than the coffee shop earned in a year. He paid no mind to the puddles that were soaking his expensive Italian shoes. Erin got to her feet, her legs unsteady. Julian Vanderquilt, the chief executive officer of Vanderquilt Industries, a man that Forbes magazine had called the Iceman, covered the distance between them in just 3 long steps. In that instant, he did not resemble a powerful executive. He looked like a brother who was ready to set the entire world on fire. He gathered her into a crushing hug, burying his face in her drenched, tangled hair. "I have you," he whispered, his voice shaking with an emotion he rarely showed. "I have you, Elle. You are safe now." He pulled back and gripped her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. He saw the puffiness around her eyes, the sunken look of her cheeks, and the cheap, soaking wet coat. His jaw clenched so tight that a muscle twitched below his ear. "Did he put his hands on you?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "No," Erin said, wiping the rain from her cheeks. He broke my spirit, Julian. He tossed me out like I was trash." Julian faced the large men who had emerged from the other cars. They were his personal security team. "Get her suitcase," he ordered. "Put her in the middle car with me. Then call the pilot and inform him we are not flying out tonight. Book the entire penthouse floor at the Fairmont Olympic. Also, get Dr. Orris on the phone. I want him to check on her." "Yes, Mr. Vanderquilt." The head of security gave a sharp nod, then picked up Erin's beaten-up suitcase with more care than Marcus had ever shown for her. Inside the warmth of the sport utility vehicle, surrounded by heated leather and the quiet purr of the engine, Erin finally let herself fall apart. She wept for the 3 years built on deception. She wept for the child she could not have and for the husband who made her feel it was her fault. She wept for being a fool, for thinking she could ever escape her family's influence and find someone who loved her for herself, not for her inheritance. Julian sat beside her, holding her hand, without a word, just letting her cry. He offered no empty comforts. He simply gave her a silk handkerchief and waited. By the time her tears finally stopped, the car was gliding through the streets of Seattle. "I told you," Erin whispered, staring out the window at the city lights. 10 years ago, I told you all I wanted was to be normal. I started using the name Erin Vance. Well, it was Erin Hart before that. I just wanted a life where people did not look at me and only see my bank account. And I honored that," Julian said gently. "I made sure the family stayed away. I let you have that small apartment. I let you take that job at the library. I even had our security detail stand down so you would not feel like you were being watched." He paused, his hand tightening around hers. "But I never stopped reading the background checks. I knew about the other woman, Elle." Erin snapped her head toward him. "You have known for 2 months. I have a file on Lydia Cross that is 3 inches thick. I was waiting for you to see the truth for yourself. I could not step in without violating our agreement. But when my security system alerted me that your phone had been turned back on, I knew it was all over." He reached into a seat pocket in front of him and took out a tablet. He swiped the screen and passed it to her. It showed a live stream of the stock market, zeroed in on one particular area: real estate and construction. "Marcus likes to think he is a major player in Seattle," Julian said, his voice regaining its cold, businesslike edge. "He just won the contract for the new city stadium, did he not? That is what gave him the nerve to throw you out today. He believes he is invincible now." Erin nodded slowly. "He called it his golden opportunity." "It is not an opportunity. It is a trap," Julian corrected. "He risked everything to secure that contract. His available cash is 0. He is surviving on borrowed money, primarily from Seattle First Bank." Erin looked at him, her exhausted eyes filled with confusion. "How could you possibly know all that?" Julian gave a faint, sharp smile. "Because, little sister, Vanderquilt. Industries finished its acquisition of Seattle First Bank this afternoon. The final papers were signed just 10 minutes before I came to get you." Erin gasped in shock. "You bought his bank?" "I bought his debt," Julian clarified. "I own the note on his house. I own his business loans. I own the credit lines he uses to buy jewelry for that mistress of his. In effect, as of this evening, I own him. The car glided to a stop in front of the hotel. Doormen hurried to open their doors. So, Julian said as he helped her from the car, we are left with two choices. Choice A is that I foreclose on everything tomorrow, destroy his credit rating, and have him bankrupt by noon. It is quick. It is clean. Aaron stood on the sidewalk, shielded from the rain by an umbrella a guard was holding. She thought about the sound of Marcus's laugh. She thought about how he checked his watch while telling her to leave. She thought about Lydia moving into her house, putting her hands on her possessions. No, Aaron said, her voice becoming her up. That is far too simple. He needs to experience it. He needs to be in a courtroom, convinced that he is about to win, just so we can see the hope drain from his face. A true grin spread across Julian's face. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely happy. Choice B it is then, the slow destruction. First, let us get you a hot shower and some food. Tomorrow, we will go shopping. If you are preparing for a war, Aaron, you must dress like a Vanderquilt. 3 days later, Marcus Vance stood in his living room, holding a glass of that champagne. The rain had finally cleared, and the Seattle skyline was sparkling. Honey, do you think this gray couch is the right choice? Lydia called from the other room. She was already in the middle of redecorating. Aaron's comfortable vintage armchairs were already gone, replaced with sharp, modern Italian pieces that seemed uncomfortable but were clearly very expensive. Whatever you want, Lyd, Marcus replied, walking over to kiss her on the forehead. You are the woman of the house now. I just want all of her negative energy gone, Lydia pouted, gently rubbing her small baby bump. Has she signed the divorce papers yet? Will, Marcus said with a scoff. She has no money, no connections, and no place to live. She is probably staying in a homeless shelter. She will sign them just to get the $5,000 relocation payment I so generously offered. The building intercom buzzed. Mr. Vance, the concierge's voice announced, a delivery for you. It appears you have been served. Marcus's brow furrowed. Send them up. A few moments later, a professional server handed him a thick bundle of papers. Marcus tore it open, fully expecting to see the signed, simple divorce forms. Instead, he saw large, bold letters across the top. Notice of contested divorce and countersuit for damages. He quickly read through the document, his face flushing with anger. She is fighting it. On what basis? Emotional distress? Fraud? He laughed out loud and tossed the papers onto the new glass coffee table. She is completely delusional. She must have hired some cheap lawyer from a strip mall to try and frighten me. He grabbed his phone and called Silas Thorne. Silas, it looks like my ex wants to put up a fight. I already saw the electronic filing, Marcus. Silas's voice was calm and indifferent. It is rather cute. They filed it in King County Superior Court. The hearing is scheduled for Friday. It is an emergency motion for spousal support. Spousal support? Marcus yelled into the phone. The prenuptial agreement specifically forbids that. We will show up in court, present the prenup, and the judge will throw her case out in less than 10 minutes. It will cost you about an hour of my billable time, but it should be entertaining to see her fail. Do you want to try and settle? Absolutely not, Marcus spat. I want to ruin her. I want her to stand there and hear the judge declare that she is entitled to nothing. Friday at 9 a.m. then. Make sure you wear the Navy suit. It gives off an air of authority. The courtroom had the smell of floor polish and old coffee. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, looking perfect in his Navy suit. Lydia was seated in the public gallery just behind him, wearing a white dress to highlight her pregnancy, perfectly playing the part of the supportive new partner. Silas Thorne sat beside Marcus, casually checking emails on a gold-cased tablet. Calm down, Marcus. This is just a formality. I just want this to be over, Marcus grumbled, nervously bouncing his foot. At 8:55 a.m., the large oak doors at the back of the room swung open. Marcus glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see Erin in her usual frumpy gray sweater, looking completely lost. A woman entered. It was indeed Erin, but not the Erin he recognized. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that was flawlessly tailored to her body. It was elegant, powerful, and it radiated wealth. Her hair, which was usually pulled back into a messy knot, was professionally styled in soft, shining waves. She had on a pair of large sunglasses, which she took off with a slow, deliberate motion, revealing eyes that were bright and determined. But it was her shoes that immediately caught Lydia's attention from the gallery. They were red-soled Louboutins, the exact kind Lydia had been pleading with Marcus to get for her for months. "Who is paying for all that?" Marcus whispered to Silas with a frown. "She was broke 3 days ago?" "Probably credit cards," Silas said dismissively. "Racking up debt will look terrible during a divorce hearing. We can use that against her." Erin walked confidently to the plaintiff's table and sat down by herself. She set a single, slim file folder down in front of her. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Lydia. She stared directly at the empty judge's bench. "Where is her attorney?" Marcus sneered. "Did he get scared and quit?" "She is representing herself," Silas chuckled. Pro Rossi. "Oh, this is going to be a complete massacre." The judge despises people who represent themselves. They slow everything down. "All rise," the bailiff called out. "The Honorable Judge Kincaid presiding." Judge Kincaid, a stern-faced woman known for having no patience for foolishness, settled onto the bench. She rustled through her papers. Case number 4921. Vance versus Vance. Let the record show the parties are present. Silas Thorne for the respondent, Marcus Vance. Silas rose to his feet, buttoning his suit jacket and smiling with practiced charm. "We are ready to proceed, Your Honor. We have a motion to dismiss this case based on a valid prenuptial agreement." "And for the plaintiff," the judge said, looking directly at Erin. "Mrs. Vance, are you planning on representing yourself in this matter?" Erin stood. Her voice was calm and carried easily to the back of the courtroom. "No, Your Honor. My legal counsel is just now arriving. He was delayed going through the security checkpoint. Court begins promptly at 9. Mrs. Vance," the judge said sharply, "if your lawyer is not here." The large double doors at the back of the courtroom were pushed open with sudden force. The entire room fell silent. Marching down the main aisle was a group of 5 lawyers dressed in identical black suits. They moved together with military precision, carrying briefcases that resembled cases for high-tech equipment. At their head was a man who seemed to draw all the air out of the room. He was tall and commanding, with a chiseled jaw. He wore a 3-piece suit that made Silas Thorne's expensive attire suddenly look like something from a department store clearance rack. A cold feeling washed over Marcus. He knew that face. Everyone in the business world knew that face. It had been on the cover of Fortune magazine just last month. It was Julian Vanderquilt, the billionaire chief executive officer of the Vanderquilt conglomerate, a man who was among the most powerful in the entire country. Marcus's brain simply stopped working. What was Julian Vanderquilt doing in this courtroom? Did he somehow purchase the entire building? Julian walked right past the gallery without a second glance. He moved straight through the swinging gate, striding past Marcus and treating him like he was nothing more than a coat rack, before stopping right beside Erin. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder, a clear signal of both complete protection and total dominance. "Julian Vanderquilt," he stated, his deep voice carrying through the room, easily filling the space without any need for a microphone. I am representing the plaintiff, Aaron Vanderquilt. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. The court reporter's fingers froze over her keyboard. Even Judge Cade peered over her spectacles, her eyebrows arched in surprise. Vanderquilt, Marcus breathed out, all the color draining from his face. He shot a look at Silas. Why would he call her Vanderquilt? Silas Thorne was no longer checking his phone. He was staring at Julian with the expression of a man who just realized he had brought a pocket knife to a full-blown war. His hands were visibly trembling. "Your Honor," Silas stuttered as he got to his feet, his usual slick confidence completely gone. I was not aware that Mr. Vanderquilt was a licensed attorney in this jurisdiction. I hold licenses in New York, London, and the state of Washington, Julian stated calmly, without even bothering to look at Silas. He retrieved a document from his briefcase and slid it smoothly across the table to the judge. "My credentials, Your Honor, along with my notice of appearance." Julian then turned his body slowly to confront Marcus. His eyes were icy, empty, and deeply frightening. "And for the benefit of the court," Julian added, speaking to everyone present but keeping his eyes locked on Marcus, "the plaintiff's name is not Vance. She has gone back to using her birth name. I am quite sure the respondent is familiar with it. Or maybe," Julian offered a chilling smile that was all teeth, like a shark, "he never took the time to find out who his wife truly was." Marcus collapsed back into his chair. He stared at Aaron, really taking her in, and for the very first time, he noticed the family resemblance. That same distinct nose. The same sharp line of her chin. He had not married a nobody. He had married the sole heiress to an empire so vast he could only fantasize about it. And he had just ordered her to walk away with absolutely nothing. "I am ready to proceed, Your Honor," Julian announced. The silence that fell over the courtroom was absolute. It was the type of profound quiet you only hear at a funeral or in the moments before a jury's verdict is revealed. Silas Thorne, a lawyer who billed $800 an hour and prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, was glaring at his tablet as if it had just grown fangs and bitten him. He was tapping frantically on the screen, searching for the name Aaron Vanderquilt. When the results finally loaded, his face went from merely pale to a ghostly shade of white. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Cade said, her patience clearly wearing thin, "are you prepared to respond to the motion to dismiss?" Silas swallowed with difficulty and loosened his expensive tie. "Yes, Your Honor. We contend that the prenuptial agreement, which was signed by Mrs. Vance, my apologies, Ms. Vanderquilt, surrenders all rights to any marital assets. It is a completely standard, ironclad agreement." Marcus leaned in close, whispering with rage, "Why do you look so worried? It is just a name. She is still the same penniless librarian." Julian Vanderquilt remained standing. He stood at the podium, his body language as relaxed as a big cat watching its wounded prey struggle. "Your Honor," Julian started, his voice as smooth as silk, but with an edge as sharp as a razor blade. "Mr. Thorne calls the prenup standard. It is far from it. It is a harsh document, specifically created to take advantage of a spouse who is perceived to have less power. But we are not here today to debate how fair the prenup is." Marcus allowed himself a smirk. Good, he thought. He realizes he cannot possibly beat the contract. "We are here," Julian went on, "to enforce it." Marcus's brow crinkled in confusion. Enforce it? Julian opened a binder bound in fine leather. Article 6, Section B of the agreement clearly says, "In the case of a divorce, both individuals will keep full ownership of any assets they acquired before the marriage, as well as any inheritance they received during the marriage. Is that not correct, Mr. Thorne? Yes, Silas replied, clearly confused. That is what protects Marcus's company. Is that so? Julian smiled. Because it also protects Aaron's assets. And seeing as my client is the beneficiary of the Vanderquilt Trust, which was set up for her when she turned 18, her personal assets when she signed this prenup were valued at approximately, let me see here. Julian took out a single sheet of paper and made a show of squinting at it. $450 million. A wave of shock went through the courtroom. A reporter in the back began typing furiously into his phone. Marcus felt lightheaded, as if all the blood had rushed from his head. He gripped the edge of the table. That is a lie, he hissed. She worked in a library. She bought her clothes from second-hand stores. She chooses to live a modest life, Julian said, without glancing at Marcus. Some people do not feel the need to broadcast their wealth to know they possess it, unlike some others. Julian turned a page in his binder. Now, this is the part that gets particularly interesting for Mr. Vance. The prenup also has a clause requiring full disclosure of one's financial status. Both parties swore under oath that they had revealed all of their assets and debts when they signed. If it turns out one person lied, the entire agreement can be voided by the party who was wronged. I disclosed every single thing, Marcus yelled, jumping to his feet. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Judge Conincade ordered sharply. Did you really? Julian asked in a calm voice. He nodded to one of his associates, who then handed a thick pile of documents to the bailiff to be delivered to the judge and the defense team. 3 years ago, Mr. Vance, you stated that your company, Vance Architecture, was financially sound. You claimed you owned the penthouse in the Obsidian Tower, but these bank statements, which we subpoenaed just this morning, prove that the penthouse was actually owned by a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. That corporation was technically bankrupt at the time because of a failed hotel development in Miami, a project you conveniently forgot to include on your disclosure forms. Silas Thorne was rapidly shuffling through the papers, starting to sweat. Objection. Relevance. The relevance, Julian stated, his voice now hard as steel, is that Mr. Vance used fraud to convince my client to sign that prenup. He desperately needed her to think he was financially secure. He was not. He was already drowning in debt back then. But here comes the interesting part, Your Honor. Julian leaned in, fixing his intense gaze on Marcus. Because Mr. Vance committed fraud, we have the right to void the prenup entirely. But we are not going to. We are choosing to enforce the penalty clause instead. Article 9. If either party is discovered to have concealed debts of more than $100,000, they must forfeit 50% of their share of the marital appreciation to the other spouse as a penalty. Julian paused to let the words sink in. Mr. Vance's company has grown significantly in value these past 3 years, largely because of the new city stadium contract he just secured. A contract, I should add, that he won with designs we intend to prove were heavily based on my client's unacknowledged contributions. She is a librarian, Marcus shrieked, completely losing his composure. She does not know the first thing about architecture. Erin rose to her feet. She did not need Julian's help for this part. She looked directly at Marcus, her gaze unwavering. Who was it that fixed the load-bearing calculations on the West Wing draft, Marcus? She asked in a quiet voice. Who was it that suggested using cross-laminated timber to reduce the carbon footprint, which was the only reason the city council even approved your proposal? You were drunk on scotch that evening. I sat down at your computer, and I cleaned up your entire mess. Marcus's mouth fell open, but not a single sound came out. He remembered. He recalled waking up and seeing the work completed, just assuming he had managed it in a drunken haze. He had never once questioned it. He had simply taken all the credit. We are freezing all of Mr. Vance's assets while we conduct an audit of his actual financial situation, Julian finished. And we are suing for 50% of Vance Architecture, in addition to all legal fees. And since my hourly rate is considerably higher than Mr. Thorne's, that is going to be a very substantial bill. Judge Conincade examined the evidence before her. She then looked over at Marcus, who was now physically trembling. The motion to dismiss is denied, the judge declared, bringing her gavel down with a loud crack. A temporary restraining order on all assets of Vance Architecture is hereby granted. Mr. Vance, you are ordered to provide complete access to all your financial records to Mr. Vanderquilt's forensic accountants by 5 p.m. today. 5 p.m.? Silas squeaked. Your Honor, that is less than 6 hours from now. Then you had better get busy making copies, the judge responded dryly. Court is adjourned. Walking out of the courthouse felt like running a gauntlet. The media had already caught wind of the Vanderquilt name. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Reporters shouted questions. Aaron, is it really true you are the Vanderquilt heiress? Marcus, were you aware that your wife was a billionaire? Mr. Vanderquilt, are you planning to buy the Seahawks? Julian's security detail cleared a path through the swarm of reporters like a bulldozer. Marcus, however, was completely surrounded. He shoved his way through the microphones, his face a tight mask of panic, while Lydia followed close behind, looking as though she was about to be sick. Marcus, what is all this going to mean? Lydia hissed, once they finally managed to get inside his Mercedes. Is she really going to get half of the company? Just shut up, Lydia. Marcus furiously slammed his hand against the steering wheel. She's getting nothing. This is all just a trick. It is nothing but smoke and mirrors. I am the architect here. I am the one with the talent. They cannot lay a finger on me. But his hands were shaking so violently that he could not manage to get the key into the ignition. He drove like a madman back to the Vance Architecture headquarters on 5th Avenue. He had to shred papers. He had to delete the emails concerning the Miami disaster. He had to transfer the money from the offshore accounts before the asset freeze was put into place. He burst through the doors into his firm's lobby, expecting the normal buzz of work, the receptionists greeting him, the interns rushing around with coffee. But instead, the lobby was eerily silent. Standing right in the middle of the room were 4 individuals dressed in dark business suits, all wearing official ID badges. They were in the process of packing files into boxes. What is going on here? Marcus bellowed, pushing past the stunned receptionist. Who in the world are you people? A woman with short gray hair stepped toward him. Mr. Vance, my name is Agent Miller with the Forensic Audit Division. We are here acting on behalf of the court-appointed receiver. Receiver? This is my company. I own this building. That is no longer the case, sir, Agent Miller stated with unnerving calm. The bank has officially called in your loans. This includes the commercial mortgage for this building and the credit line you have been using for your payroll. The bank is required to give me 30 days' notice before doing that. They can do it immediately if a borrower experiences a significant negative change in their financial situation, the agent countered. The asset freeze, ordered by Judge Kincaid just an hour ago, qualifies as such a change. Therefore, Seattle First Bank is now demanding immediate repayment of all outstanding debts. Marcus felt the world stop. Seattle First Bank. He could suddenly hear Julian's voice in his head. The company Vanderquilt Industries completed its acquisition of Seattle First Bank earlier this afternoon. It was a perfectly laid trap, and he had walked straight into it. Julian did more than just sue him. He purchased the very ground Marcus was standing on and was now yanking it away from underneath his feet. Marcus. He spun around to find David, his chief financial officer, emerging from his office, holding a box filled with his personal belongings. David's face was as white as a sheet. David, you have to tell them. Tell them about our cash reserves. We do not have any, Marcus, David mumbled, refusing to meet his gaze. You used up all our reserves for the renovations on the penthouse and the engagement ring you bought for Miss Cross. Lydia, who had just stepped off the elevator, stopped in her tracks. Every eye in the room shifted to the enormous diamond sparkling on her finger. In an instant, it no longer looked like a promise of love. It looked like a piece of stolen property. I am submitting my resignation, Marcus, David said in a low voice. I cannot get caught up in a federal fraud investigation. I have a family to think about. You are a coward, Marcus shouted. I am the one who made you. You exploited us, David shot back. With that, he turned and walked out the door. Marcus rushed toward his office, but the door was already locked. A security guard, undoubtedly one of the new ones sent by Julian, stood in his way. Your access has been revoked, Mr. Vance. This is my private office. Not until a full audit is completed, sir. We are asking you to please leave the premises on your own, or we will have to physically escort you out. Marcus staggered backward, his breath catching in his throat. He scanned the large, open-concept office space. All of his employees, the architects, designers, and engineers were staring at him. He saw no loyalty in their faces, only second-hand embarrassment. They already knew. They must have seen the headlines. They knew their boss had thrown his wife out, only to learn that she possessed the power to buy and sell him a dozen times over. He looked toward Lydia. She was by the elevator, typing a frantic message on her phone. Lydia, let's go. We will drive to the lake house. We can sort this all out there. Lydia glanced up at him. Her entire demeanor had shifted. The innocent, adoring gaze was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look that was eerily similar to Marcus's own. The lake house? She questioned. The one you claimed was in your name alone? Or does that also belong to some secret shell corporation? It is. It is a bit complicated. But we are a team, are we not? We are about to have a son together. Lydia lowered her eyes to her belly, and then she looked back up at him. I require security, Marcus. You gave me your word I would have a life of wealth and comfort. You swore there would be no drama. This, she said, pointing toward the federal agents and the boxes, this does not look like wealth. This looks like a major crime. I am the one who was wronged here, Marcus insisted. She deceived me. She led me to believe she had no money. And you led me to believe you were wealthy, Lydia retorted without any warmth. The elevator chimed as it arrived. I am going to stay with my sister. Do not contact me until this is all resolved. Lydia, you are pregnant with my heir. She walked into the elevator. I am pregnant with a burden. The doors slid shut. Marcus was left completely alone in the lobby of an empire he had constructed with deceit. The reception desk phone began to ring. It was a journalist. A moment later, a second line lit up, and then a third. He spun around and stumbled out of the building onto the street. He pulled out his phone to call Silas, but the screen lit up with an alert. A new email had arrived from Vanderquilt Industries. The subject line read, Settlement Offer. His hand shook as he opened the message. Mr. Vance, we are prepared to withdraw the fraud allegations and cease the pursuit of your personal bankruptcy if you agree to the conditions listed below. 1. You must sign the uncontested divorce documents without delay. 2. You must issue a public statement acknowledging that the primary design for the city stadium was the creation of Aaron Vanderquilt. 3. You must resign from your position as Chief Executive Officer of Vance Architecture and sign over your controlling shares to Aaron Vanderquilt for the price of $1. You have 1 hour to comply. Julian Vanderquilt. Marcus just stared at his phone. $1. They were offering to purchase his entire life's work for just $1. He tilted his head back and looked at the sky. Rain was starting to fall again. Marcus was sitting in the main conference room of the law firm that had, until recently, represented him. His lawyer, Silas Thorne, had excused himself an hour earlier, claiming a conflict of interest as soon as Julian's legal team began sending over threats of a malpractice suit. Marcus was on his own. The 1 hour deadline had passed. The door swung open. It was not a group of attorneys this time. It was only Aaron and Julian. Aaron strode to the head of the long table. She set down a single, perfectly crisp document on the polished mahogany. Next to it, she placed a fountain pen. Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. His tie was hanging loose. His high-end suit was a mess of wrinkles. He appeared to have aged 10 years since that morning. "Aaron," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "We can find a solution. Please, I know you loved me at one time." Aaron gazed at him with an expression he could not quite decipher. It was not hatred. It was not even anger. It was pity. That single emotion wounded Marcus more deeply than any furious outburst ever could. "I was in love with the person I believed you to be, Marcus," she replied gently. "I was in love with the man who claimed he wanted to create things that would endure. But you do not create, you only consume." "I was feeling the pressure," Marcus begged, getting to his feet with unsteady hands. The economy was collapsing. I had to secure the stadium contract to keep the company afloat. "I did it for the two of us." "Do not," Julian interjected, his voice sharp and sudden. He had been standing like a silent guard by the door. "Do not dare insult her intelligence. You did it to feed your own ego. You did it so you could afford a larger yacht and trade in your wife for a newer model." Marcus collapsed back into his chair. "If I agree to this, I will be left with nothing. My entire reputation will be gone. I will be finished in the city." "Your reputation has already been destroyed," Aaron stated, plainly. "The news moves on quickly, Marcus. The term Vance fraud is already a top trend on Twitter. The American Institute of Architects has already suspended your license while they investigate. It is all over." She gently tapped the document. "This is an act of mercy, Marcus. If you sign this, Julian will call off his investigators. You will stay out of prison for bank fraud. You will be able to walk away a free man. A broke man, but a free one." Marcus looked down at the paper. "Transfer of ownership. In consideration of $1. "What about Lydia?" Marcus asked in a whisper. "Lydia contacted my office 20 minutes ago," Julian announced, glancing at his wristwatch. "She is making a deal with us. She is offering to provide information about your secret offshore accounts if we grant her immunity from prosecution. She is not coming back for you, Marcus." The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. Marcus Vance, the man who dreamed of being a king, reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly that the ink bled onto the page as he signed his name. He slid the document across the table to Aaron. Aaron reached into her own pocket. She took out a single, wrinkled dollar bill. It was old and soft from being passed through many hands. "Here," she said, pushing it over to him. Marcus could only stare at the bill. The face of George Washington seemed to stare right back. "Take it," Aaron insisted. Marcus reached out his hand and picked up the dollar. It felt like it was scorching his skin. "Get out of here," Julian ordered. Marcus rose to his feet. He walked toward the door with heavy steps. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob, looking back at the woman he had so foolishly underestimated. "What do you plan to do with the company?" he asked, his voice sounding empty. You are a librarian. You have no idea how to lead a firm like this. Erin smiled, a real and radiant smile he had not seen on her face in years. I am not going to lead it, Marcus. I am going to take it apart, piece by piece, and after that, I am going to build something genuine. Marcus stepped out into the hall. The elevator was there, waiting for him. He got inside, the doors closed, and he began his long descent into total obscurity. The alarm clock on the floor went off at 5:30 in the morning, a loud, tinny buzz that rattled against the cheap linoleum. Marcus Vance slid off the mattress, his back screaming in protest. There was no bed frame, only a box spring lying on the floor of a tiny studio apartment in Renton, a world away from the glittering skyscrapers of downtown Seattle. The room had a lingering smell of old, instant coffee and the kind of damp, earthy odor common to the Pacific Northwest, which seemed to creep in through the single-pane window. Marcus rubbed his unshaven face. He had not used a razor in 3 days. Razor blades were a luxury now, and when you earn a construction worker's wage, you learn to make everything last. He got dressed in the dim light, pulling on a pair of stiff Carhartt work pants covered in drywall dust, a well-worn flannel shirt, and steel-toed boots that were a size too small. He did not slip into a fine Italian suit. He did not fasten a Rolex to his wrist. He did a quick check of his pockets, finding his keys, a public transit pass, and a single folded dollar bill he kept tucked away in the most hidden part of his wallet. He drank his coffee, without cream or sugar, leaning over the kitchen sink and looking at his own reflection in the rust-spotted mirror. All the arrogance had vanished from his eyes, replaced with a deep, permanent look of exhaustion. It was a Tuesday, but it was not just an ordinary Tuesday. Marcus had to take 2 different buses to get downtown. He chose a seat at the very back, pulling his hat down low and making sure not to look at the other commuters who were all absorbed in their phones. He was once the man who sat in the back of a private town car, reading his emails on a tablet and feeling annoyed by the morning traffic. Now, he was part of that traffic. He exited the bus at 4th and Pike and then walked for 6 blocks. He should not have come here. He knew this was just a form of self-punishment. But he found he was unable to stay away. The construction project that had been the source of his downfall was now complete. Only 6 months earlier, this entire block was meant to become the Vance Millennium Tower, a towering tribute to his own ego, a sharp shard of glass meant to pierce the clouds. He had gambled away his marriage, his principles, and his own soul in order to get it built. Now, as he stood on the opposite side of the street, shivering in his thin coat against the cold autumn breeze, he could see what it had become instead. The new building was shorter, with a more inviting presence. The harsh, aggressive lines from his original plans had been replaced with softer curves. The exterior was not made of cold, impersonal steel. It was a thoughtful combination of reclaimed timber and living green walls that made the entire structure seem to be alive, breathing in sync with the city. A giant banner celebrating the grand opening of the Erin Vance Community Center and Public Library stretched between 2 large oak trees. A cold realization hit him. She had not kept his name to honor him, but to haunt him. The name he had spent millions branding as a mark of elite luxury was now a beacon for public good and charity. She had completely rewritten his legacy, and he had not had a say in it. A large crowd was forming, but it was not his old circle of wealthy socialites. These were ordinary people, students with full backpacks, older couples walking hand in hand, and young mothers navigating strollers. An energy of pure, unforced excitement filled the air, something Marcus's expensive public relations teams could never create. And then he saw her. Aaron stepped onto the elevated plaza, and the air left his lungs. She was transformed. It was not just the expensive look of her cream cashmere coat. It was her sense of freedom. The constant stress she carried in her shoulders during their marriage had vanished completely. Her hair flowed freely, dancing in the breeze. She was smiling genuinely at the comment from the man beside her. Marcus narrowed his eyes. The man was tall, dressed in a tweed jacket with glasses, not a predator like Julian. He had the gentle look of an academic or an author. Then the man rested a hand on the small of Aaron's back. The gesture was so simple, so intimate, that it struck Marcus like a punch to the gut. An announcer's voice echoed from the speakers. It was the mayor. "Welcome to a new beginning for Seattle." Marcus observed the event like a phantom at his own burial, listening as the mayor commended the foresight of a woman who knew a home was about community, not just four walls. Then Erin approached the microphone. "Thank you," she began. Her voice rang out with clarity, amplified across the square and echoing off the nearby skyscrapers. "1 year ago, someone told me I had no place in this city's future. I was told a person's value is based on what they can acquire." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the audience. For one heart-stopping moment, Marcus was certain she had spotted him. He ducked back behind a lamppost. "But I have learned that true worth is measured by what you can give back," Erin went on, her hand naturally coming to rest on her belly. A subtle curve was visible beneath the cashmere. Marcus clutched the frigid steel of the post. A baby. Lydia had ended her own pregnancy just a week after his downfall, refusing any connection to a ruined man. She was in Los Angeles now, chasing movie producers. But Erin was starting a family. "This center," Erin declared, motioning toward the building, "was raised from the wreckage of a terrible error. We demolished an ego to lay a foundation that could support everyone. This library is for the student searching for a quiet space to imagine a future. This legal clinic is for the person who needs help escaping a toxic relationship. All of this is for you." The sound of the applause was overwhelming. It was not a polite, reserved clap. It was an eruption of pure support. A single tear, hot with rage, traced a path down Marcus's face. He angrily swiped it away. He had erected towers of glass and steel. He had collected trophies, but never had anyone looked at him with the admiration that crowd showed for her. "She is incredible, right?" Marcus startled. A woman beside him, holding a paper bag of groceries, was beaming at the stage. "I knew her once," Marcus mumbled, his voice hoarse. "You are fortunate," the woman replied. "She is the reason this neighborhood is still here. That builder, Vance. The one who wanted to destroy the community garden for his project? I think he went to prison." Good riddance to him. Marcus turned his collar up against the wind. Yeah, good riddance. Up on the stage, it was time for the ribbon cutting. Julian Vanderquilt came forward, looking as imposing as always, yet his expression softened when he gazed at his sister. He passed the ceremonial scissors to her. Erin sliced through the ribbon. A live band immediately launched into a lively jazz number. Biodegradable confetti made from dried leaves fluttered down on the crowd. Marcus turned his back on the scene. He could no longer bear to witness their happiness. It was a light too brilliant for his own darkness. He started walking away, his work boots feeling like lead on the sidewalk. He walked by a luxury furniture store, the type he and Lydia used to frequent. In the large display window, he caught his reflection, a worn-out, middle-aged man in work clothes, with nothing left but an aching back and a past nobody would ever believe. He dug into his pocket and took out the single-dollar bill. He pressed it flat against the cold glass. Transfer of ownership for the consideration of $1. That piece of paper represented more than just his former company. It was the cost of his pride. It was the price Aaron put on all his intimidation, his influence, and his Simpsons, and his cruelty. He finally understood that he had lost more than his fortune. He had been completely written out of the story. Erin did not ruin him for revenge. She had simply moved beyond him. She took all his hatred and used it as fertilizer to grow something beautiful. Got any spare change? A man sitting on a wooden crate at the street corner rattled a paper cup. Marcus glanced at the man, then down at the dollar in his hand. It was the last of his money until his paycheck on Friday. He needed it for food, but it felt heavy in his pocket, like a stone. It was a symbol of everything he had failed at. "Here," Marcus said, and let the bill fall into the cup. "God bless you," the man replied. "Do not bother," Marcus answered darkly. "It has no value." He headed for the bus stop, melting into the anonymous gray of the city, becoming just another face in a world he used to believe was his. Back at the grand opening, the crowd began to thin out, with people moving into the bright, welcoming lobby of the center. Julian approached Erin and gave her a bottle of water. "Are you all right?" he asked in a low voice, his gaze sweeping the area. Security reported seeing a man who fits his description over on the southeast corner, near 4th and Pike. Erin drank some water. Her eyes went to the street corner with the bus stop, but the street was now empty. "I know," she said softly. "I could feel he was here. Should I have him removed? I can get a restraining order processed before the end of the day." Erin shook her head, a faint, melancholic smile on her face. She glanced over at Liam, who was happily pointing out the entrance to the kids' reading area to a group of small children. "No, Julian," she replied. "Let him watch. Let him see what actual strength is. Besides," she added, gently touching her brother's arm, "he is already trapped in a jail he built for himself. Its walls are made of regret, and a sentence like that has no chance of parole." Julian gave a slow nod. "You are far too good for him. You always have been, even when you were hiding away in that library." "I was not hiding," Erin corrected, taking his arm in hers. "I was learning, and I learned that most villains are just heroes who lost their way and forgot how to care." "Well," Julian said with a slight grin, fastening a button on his jacket, "this particular villain is starving, and seeing as you are this year's biggest philanthropist, lunch is on you." Erin's laugh was bright and clear, completely free from the weight of her past. "It is a deal, but we have to go to that taco truck over on 3rd Avenue. I have a serious craving for spicy tacos." The billionaire chief executive officer arched an eyebrow. "I was picturing Liagos, Julian. This is a democracy now." Together they descended the steps of the new center. The brother who came in like a storm, and the sister who washed everything clean, leaving the ruins of a glass fortress behind them so they could build something that was truly meant to last. Erin's transformation from a quiet, controlled wife into a force for good is a powerful lesson. Never assume that silence means weakness. Marcus Vance believed he was in complete control because he was loud and had an impressive title. He never understood that real strength does not need to be loud. It can be patient. Ultimately, the fragile empire Marcus constructed crumbled because it was built on lies. He was not defeated because Erin had a rich brother. He was defeated because he never truly knew the woman he shared his life with. He was so busy chasing the image of success that he lost his grip on what was real. Erin did more than take his fortune. She rewrote his entire story. She transformed a monument to corporate greed into a safe haven for everyone. This shows that the greatest revenge is not just tearing down your opponent. It is building something better in a way they never could have imagined. In the end, she got everything that mattered: Not because of her family name, but because she finally became the person she was always meant to be. The lesson here is simple, but powerful. Your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not surrender. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying your enemy. It is becoming so successful, so free, so genuinely happy that their cruelty becomes completely irrelevant. Marcus lost everything not because Aaron had money or connections. He lost because he never bothered to truly see the woman standing right in front of him. He was so blinded by his own reflection that he missed the hurricane forming in her quiet eyes. Remember this. The people who dismiss you, who mock you, who tell you that you are nothing, they are not your judges. They are simply characters in your origin story. If you felt that satisfying chill when Julian walked into that courtroom, if your heart raced when Aaron slid that single dollar across the table, then you understand exactly why stories like this matter. Hit that like button if you believe karma always finds its way. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Aaron's place? Would you have taken the company, or would you have sent Marcus straight to prison? I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know your answer. Subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice, betrayal, and the sweet taste of revenge served ice cold. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and lasting value to our audience. Until next time, remember, the truth always wins in the end. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one of all.